Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Jessa Lynn, and tonight, to help you sleep, we're going to discuss one of the greatest property thefts in history, the robbery of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts in 1990. This resulted in the robbery or theft of 13 highly valuable pieces of art. They did it in the middle of the night, and they were never found, and none of the missing art pieces have been recovered. The estimated value of the stolen goods is $500 million. There is a $10 million reward for any information that leads to the return of the 13 pieces of stolen art, and an additional $100,000 reward for a filial stolen from a Napoleonic flag. So, tonight we're going to learn about how the theft was conducted. We're going to learn any leads and the issues with the investigation following the theft, which will lead us to the Irish Mafia, the Boston Mafia. So the Irish Mafia, as in Whitey Bulger, and the Italian Mafia or Boston Mafia, in addition, that are believed to be engaged with this specific crime. We'll also think about the purpose behind art theft, knowing that these pieces of art cannot be sold on the open market, and so their value is a bit different. And finally, if this is what you're interested in, skip to the end, because we're going to take a look at the particular paintings that were stolen, admire them, and understand where they were located in the museum itself. Okay? So let's start with the museum. The museum was opened in 1903 by Isabella Stewart Gardner. And we have a picture of her here. Okay, so let's take a look at her. That's a portrait of her that actually stands in the museum. Now, this is a map of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. This is the courtyard. It was designed to look like a Venetian palace. And so if you go there, it's quite breathtaking. I highly suggest a trip. And you'll actually see empty frames where the stolen pieces of art once were. The Vermeers and Rembrandts were the primary focus of the robbery. And so there is one where Rembrandt, his self-portrait of an artist as a young man at about 23, is actually staring at the place where his painting that was stolen was taken. So if you go into the museum, you'll see the self-portrait, and then across the self-portrait you'll see the empty frame, which is, of course, an intentional design to show you how the artist stares at the work that has been stolen, not just from the museum, but from everyone who would go there to look at it. Okay, so that's what you can see here, and we'll look at pictures at the end of the Venetian courtyard. And then each of these rooms are art installations. And it's an unusual museum because as you walk through, there's really no placards telling you who painted this or that and the history of it. It's entirely an art museum dedicated to experience. And the different rooms are organized not by period necessarily and not by artist, but rather by specific narratives of art that Isabella Gardner wanted to produce. And so the organization of the paintings and the way that you experience them as you walk through the museum is very intentional and different than any ordinary museum you might attend, which makes this robbery in a way even more devastating, because they stole essentially pages from a book that she was writing. through architecture and through famous art pieces. So we will go through this map. As you can see, I have a map with the highlighted areas where the robbery was conducted, so we can actually follow the motions of the two robbers as they moved throughout the building. But who is Isabella Gardner? She was born in 1840 and died in 1924. She married a Bostonian, John Lowell Gardner, and they traveled widely, and that's when she got her passion for collecting. And when Isabella's father left her his great fortune in 1891, she began a remarkable art collection and decided to design a building that could house it. Now, at the time in Boston, the area near Fenway was very cheap. So she bought up some land in the Fenway area, which also was known in the 90s when this robbery occurred, which is the Fens, as they would call it, was the place that the mob would dump bodies. So you're already seeing that if the museum is close to the Fens, then it's likely that the mob had something to do with this robbery. So you're already seeing that connection there. But she bought up that land near the Fens in the Fenway area. And she built this incredible structure around a kind of Venetian courtyard, which is in itself an art form, because one of her great passions was gardening. So when you go, you see that, and you can actually see the stolen paintings from the courtyard itself. If you look up the windows, you can see the stolen paintings there. Okay. So again, the museum opened in 1903. It was struggling a lot financially around the 1990s. And the Boston mob, or Boston mafia, and the Irish mobs, they were very aware that the Isabella Gardner Museum was struggling financially and did not have a security system that was efficient, and it had holes. It was a good mark, essentially, and everyone kind of knew that it was a good mark. And the museum also at the time had no insurance on any of these paintings. Billions of dollars of paintings in this building, and they were not insured. So it was very clear that if a robbery would occur, this would be the place to hit if one needed art for any specific reason. Now, why would one need art, need to steal art? That's a good question. So the stolen art market is valued at between 6 billion and 10 billion a year. So that means that about 10,000 new stolen artworks are added to the art loss register every year. And stolen art doesn't seem like a useful resource, right? Because you can't sell it. And if you were to move it, you put yourself in a very dangerous position, because you might move it to the wrong person, or you might attract attention, and a new sighting of the painting might occur, and you will go down, right? So a lot of times art becomes something that you just store, you hide, and it doesn't appear to have any direct monetary value. But there are a lot of ways that stolen art does have monetary value, and that leads us to the potential reasoning behind the Isabella Gardner theft. So here are a few reasons why one might steal art. One of the probably largest reasons is in the organized crime business that art can be used as collateral essentially, you can use it for financing. It's like taking out a loan. You can take out a loan against the value of a stolen painting. So organized crimes groups might secure loans, right, for weapons or for drug deals. The same goes for ransom. A lot of groups will hold paintings for ransom, or, and you'll see this in the mafia and the mob when we talk about it soon, they might use stolen paintings as a bargaining chip. When certain mobsters were facing prison time, they could say, well, I know where this painting is, and if I tell you where this painting is, you'll give me a reduced sentence. So in a lot of ways, it could be used as a safety precaution for someone involved in crime. Okay. There are also, of course, the black market. There are many private collectors who are willing to buy stolen art and keep them in private collections, viewable only by those who are trustworthy. And there are others who steal solely for the thrill. And in fact, there was a French art robber, I guess, who had kept close to $2 billion worth of stolen art in his attic in a tiny house in a city in the, I think it was Western France, but it was a very, like a mill city, so it wasn't a wealthy place at all. And there hidden was almost $2 billion worth of art that he never sold, and he kept solely because he found the pieces to be beautiful and he wanted to experience them. He considered himself an art liberator, right? So there are those who do it for the thrill, who might consider themselves art liberators of a kind and merely want to experience art themselves. So those are the different types of art. And so when we look at this crime, we need to think about what was the purpose behind this robbery. Were the robbers intending to use these paintings as collateral in some sort of large weapons deal or drug deal? Was it a bargaining chip for people in an organized crime situation? It's also a high-value currency that can move more easily across borders. So if you want to pay for something, but you can't deposit a massive amount of cash to someone in a bank, right? You can offer them this Vermeer, for instance, this painting, this Rembrandt, instead, which can be easily transported across the sea without setting off any flags. So they're very, very useful for international payments that cannot go through financial institutions. All right, so that's really why art became such an enormous illegal market. It's really funding and working as a financial grounding towards other illegal markets. So it's not necessarily that you have a high, illegal value in stealing a painting and selling it to a private collection. In a lot of ways, the illegal art is connected to a much larger illegal business, like weapons dealing, like drug dealing, like human trafficking, so on and so forth, which is why it is also very, very important that we keep our pieces of artwork safe. Now, most robberies of art do not occur in these high-profile museums. They're usually occurring in private residences. That's where most of these art thefts occur. And only about 10% of art thefts are closed cases, or are actually returned. So the Isabella Gardner Museum is not unusual in the fact that it remains unsolved. What is unusual about it is the incredibly expensive paintings and really renowned paintings that were taken. Again, the $500 million makes it the largest property theft in history. So something to think about. So what actually happened? We're going to look at the map now, and we'll take a look. So I'm just going to move this camera a little bit. There's my TV. Boop. So we can take a look at the map here. Alright, so let me get a little closer to my microphone. Okay, now let's look at the map. Alright, here's the map of the Isabella Gardner Museum here. Right. On March 18th, 1990, two men disguised as police officers arrived at the employee entrance of the Isabella Gardner Museum. They were met by a night guard, and this night guard stopped them, but they said that they were responding to a disturbance. The night guard let them in against protocol. And after they gained entry, the two men dressed as cops immediately handcuffed the two night guards, brought them to the basement, and secured them against a supporting pole. They then completely duct taped the guards' faces, leaving only their nose as a place for them to breathe, but their eyes and mouth were duct taped shut. They then proceeded to move throughout the museum, stealing artwork over the course of 81 minutes. Now, 81 minutes is a very long time, especially when you consider the high-risk thing that they were carrying out. This is a high-risk heist, again, of $500 million worth of art. And they really took their time, if you think about it, with 80 minutes in the over an hour inside the museum stealing these works of art. Now, as I take us through the rooms, you're going to realize that there are a few oddities related to this crime that may explain why it's still unsolved. Thinking about how they gained entry to the building, knowing to dress as cops, finding the night guards, securing their place, and also turning off all the security cameras in the building. Given all that, it seems that these thieves were experienced, that they likely had done this before. And yet everything that would follow in the 81 minutes completely confounds this reading. So I'll show you, walk you through the map, what they did, and tell you everything that's a bit strange in regards to this theft. Alright, so let's open up. Okay. So we'll go to the first floor, called the Palace. They didn't go to the first floor first. Actually, they moved to the second floor, and the reason for that is that the most famous paintings were actually in the Dutch room. They knew that the Dutch room contained the most valuable works of art. Okay, so they went to the second floor of the palace, to the Dutch room, located right here. You can see this is the window looking out upon the courtyard. So here they stole a Vermeer, the concert. Vermeer only painted 36 that we know of, that we have in our, that we possess, 36 that known paintings that Vermeer produced, the concert being one of them. The painting is now valued at $250 million, and it is still missing, so that gives you an idea of the type of loss that this Vermeer was to this museum and also to the world. Okay, so the concert, a domestic scene painted by Vermeer, was stolen from the Dutch room. In addition, a flink landscape with an obelisk and an ancient Chinese beaker called a gu was stolen from the Dutch room. The most, known stolen paintings from the Isabella Gardner Museum are the Rembrandts. There's that famous line that is, "They came for the Rembrandts," which is what they spoke of, or they refer to the people who stole. They say, when you hear about the Isabella Gardner Museum, it's always, "They came for the Rembrandts." So they stole from the Dutch room again Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, and a lady and gentleman in black. They also stole a small self-portrait etching. Luckily enough, though, this painting here, Rembrandt's self-portrait, age 23, was left leaning against a table. So they intended to steal it, but they did not have time. They then moved to the short gallery here, stop number 2, where they took 5 Degas and a bronze eagle filio from a Napoleonic flag. Now let's stop and think about why these choices were odd, because they were a little odd. In this short gallery, there was actually a Michelangelo sketch that was worth far more money, with far much more expensive drawing to steal, and yet they left the Michelangelo. No one knows why. In these paintings, the Vermeer and the Rembrandt, they could not get them out of their frames, even though they were there for 81 minutes. So rather than pulling them out of their frames and protecting the integrity of the painting, they took a knife and slashed them out of their frames, essentially cutting them out of their frames, which will reduce their value. So if these thieves were interested in money, right, if they're interested in using these as collateral, they were reducing the financial value of them. Why not, if you're there for 81 minutes, take the time to preserve the value of the painting itself? It's almost as if these people hated the art with the violence in which they put forth against these masterpieces. Even the filio, which is the top of a flagpole, you know, the little eagle that's often at the top of flags, even that was torn from the flag itself. It was clear they wanted to take the whole flag but could not get the flag off the wall, and so they settled for the filio. And this just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, why they would seem so rushed, and yet they were there for so long. Now they also went to the blue room, okay? The blue room here on the first floor. And that's where they stole a Monet, the Chez Tortoni, okay? And so they stole the Chez Tortoni from a Monet from the blue room right here. Okay, and they kind of took that on their way out as a sort of afterthought. And the question is, again, why take that one? But why neglect the much more expensive Rape of Europa that was up here, right, in the Titian room? Why completely avoid that one in the Titian room, the Rape of Europa, which was by far the most expensive painting in the entire collection? And so if we're thinking about monetary reasons, it's almost as if they didn't understand what they were taking. They were taking randomly. I mean, there was really no theme to any of the things that were stolen. They came for the Rembrandts, probably because these are a common painter who was obviously was going to be worth money. They took a Monet, and they took a Vermeer. But why? That was the question. And then they left, and the cops did not come until about 8:30 in the morning. Okay, so these were the things that they stole, neglecting, again, the most expensive paintings in the museum. All right. So let's talk about the investigation that proceeded, because this is when we get to corruption. Significant corruption in the Boston FBI, the Boston chapter of the FBI. Okay, and this is where we learn about the organized crime that was going on in Boston in the 90s. I actually was born in Boston in the 90s, so this is kind of my home. Yeah, well, anyway, I was a little Boston girl as a kid. Yeah, anyway, okay. So, my dad has stories about mobsters. Maybe one day I'll tell my dad's mobster stories, because he grew up in Boston too, in the 70s, which was a fun time in Boston. And we're Irish Catholic, so yeah, we're the real deal. Okay, at the time of the heist, Boston had two crime families that were actively warring against each other. The first was the Patriarca family, an Italian mob known as the Boston Mafia. The second was Whitey Bulger and his Winter Hill Gang, an Irish-American mob that engaged in loan sharking, weapon stealing, gambling, fixing horse races, and most importantly, trafficking weapons or smuggling weapons to the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, in Ireland. Now, when the FBI arrived to the museum the morning of March 18th at 8:30, they immediately shut down the investigation entirely to outside organizations like the Boston Police. This is an unusual decision. Even though the crime is federal and the FBI would be in charge of a federal crime, most art robberies throughout the United States were worked on with multiple agencies with a good flow of communication in order to solve them, especially when something like $500 million is at stake. But the FBI did not do so. They immediately refused to share any information with the Boston Police Department, even though the police department would have valuable contacts that could lead to the retrieval of the stolen artwork. The FBI proceeds to bungle the investigation. They don't put enough FBI agents on the case. They lose important evidence. They neglect to fully investigate the two night guards, one which appears to have been a suspicious person who actually invited a stranger into the museum after hours. This was completely ignored. Lie detection tests suggest that he knew more about the heist than he was letting on, and yet the FBI dropped that lead and stated that he had no involvement. The case followed many leads leading all over the world, from Italy to Japan, China, Europe, all over the place, but came up with no useful leads at all. In 1998, Boston woke up to discover that the FBI had in fact been infiltrated by the mob boss, Whitey Bulger. Boston learns that the FBI is rife with corruption, and this is largely due to the fact that Whitey Bulger was taken on as an informant against the Patriarca family, the rival mafia. In return for his informing on the patriarchal family, he had special privileges from the FBI, including the Winter Hill Gang, was for the most part ignored by the FBI and left to carry on their crimes in peace. John Connolly was Whitey Bulger's handler in the FBI, and he actually told Whitey Bulger ahead of time that he was being investigated for a RICO case, allowing him to escape for several years before he was caught, tried, proven guilty for 19 murders, and later died in prison in West Virginia. The reason this corruption is important is because people began to think that Whitey Bulger may have influenced the investigation and may have in fact been responsible for the heist. An investigator, Charles Hill of Europe, a famous British actually, a famous investigator of art thefts and responsible for the return of several very, very famous paintings that had been stolen, came up with a theory that Whitey Bulger had arranged for the stealing of the paintings, then smuggled them to Ireland, where he thought they would be safe. He believed that they were with a violent gang in Ireland who did not know what to do with them. He had some evidence to suggest this, including the arrests of Murray and Nee, two associates of Whitey Bulger who were caught smuggling guns to the IRA. It may be that Whitey Bulger intended to use the paintings as collateral in a large-scale weapons deal with the IRA. He believed, British Charles Hill, the investigator, that these paintings were shipped between 1990 and 1995. He also believed this because the guards reported that the two men who robbed the museum said mate to them, suggesting that they were either Irish or British. He also thought that the connecting theme in the art stolen was the depiction of horses, particularly in the Degas illustrations, which is a well-known, iconic Irish image, and that those supporting Irish heritage and nationality would choose the sketches of horses over the very, very expensive Michelangelo. And so he believed that this crime was carried out by the Irish. It also was carried out at a time near St. Patrick's Day in Boston. Now, Murray and Nee, the ones smuggling guns, claimed that they had access to the paintings, but this never came to fruition, and Murray, the number one guy who stated this, was later shot by his wife in 1992, so no one ever got any information out of them, and this theory for the most part ran cold. Now come 2013, the FBI releases information that they have two suspects named in the heist itself. This is over 20 years following the actual crime, when hopefully most corruption has been expunged from the agency. The names of their suspects are George Resfelder and Leonard de Muzio. They are associates of the mobster Carmelo Merlino, an underboss of the patriarchal family, operating out of TRC Auto Electric in Dorchester, a suburb of Boston. These two men matched the descriptions of the men who robbed the museum. Now, Carmelo Merlino also had a significant criminal past in large-scale robberies, and so the robbery was likely planned in the auto electric store. And he claimed and was caught, overheard, saying and bragging that he had access to the paintings themselves. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of this lead either. But the prevailing notion is that these paintings, after they were stolen, were transported to either Connecticut or Pennsylvania, where they attempted to sell them on the black market. Whether they succeeded or not is unknown, and these paintings and the filial and the little Chinese beaker remain to this day missing. So it is perhaps possible that the paintings have remained as close as Connecticut or Pennsylvania, and it's not unheard of that you might find your way to an abandoned place and discover that there is a masterpiece there that has been hidden and forgotten about. And we can only hope that this will occur, that they will be rediscovered, and that they were not destroyed out of fear or anxiety, which sometimes does happen with stolen paintings. It's possible it's in a private collection and the person who owns it does not even know that they are stolen. With stolen art, there are so often several people who know of the whereabouts of the stolen art but are afraid to come forward due to fear of prosecution. But at this point, the heist was so far in the past that prosecution is not an interest of the FBI, only retrieval of the paintings themselves. So, if you have any interest in a $10 million reward and you want to go on a little hunt for art, this would be a fascinating place to start, a kind of modern treasure hunt. The last place they were heard of was Connecticut, so I guess that's where you gotta go. I don't know. It is so depressing to me that paintings so extraordinary by such masters of the human condition were ripped from their frames and taken to an auto body shop in Dorchester for the purpose of weapons dealing, or for the purpose of gambling or drug running, whatever it is that the patriarchal family was involved in. They stole that from the public, and so it's terrible. The way I can explain art theft is the way it was explained to me, which is, imagine when you steal a painting, it's as if a song has just snuffed out of existence. It was there and now it's not. You can't do that with like a piece of music. Like, you can't just take a piece of music like, I don't know, the Moonlight Sonata, and just disappear it. You wake up one morning and it's gone. Or you wake up one morning and a famous Tolstoy novel is gone. War and Peace just disappears. That's what losing art and having art stolen like that is like. It's like waking up one moment and finding that War and Peace no longer exists. And so we can only hope that they are hidden somewhere, forgotten, and that someone will stumble upon them. Who knows? Oh, that's a Rembrandt that's been missing. So we'll see. I think they'll turn up. I think things tend to do that. But let's look at them now so we can remember them. I have this book here called Stolen, and it's got all pictures of the paintings that were taken, and it's a very, very beautiful book. It's velvet right here, and it's very short, but it's kind of like a gallery book of the paintings that are no longer in a gallery. It's a sad thing, but yeah, it's stolen. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we will take a look at some of these very famous missing paintings, in the hope that maybe one day one of you will recognize it and return them to their rightful place. Good. Okay, here is the book, Stolen. picture, a self-portrait of Rembrandt, an etching, one that was stolen. It's very small, so it's about the size that you see printed in the book. Okay, it's believed again that the robbers came specifically for the Rembrandts. As you know, in the museum, the frames of the stolen paintings still hang where they originally were, speaking to the importance of the organization of our paintings, which were made into a conversation. Okay. So here's a picture, a very good picture, of the courtyard of this palace. So you'll see here, if you look in these windows, if you can look in, you'll see one Rembrandt, the Sea of Galilee, here, and beside another Rembrandt that was stolen. So these two sat almost side by side in the Dutch room. And these were the two paintings that were stolen. And now, when you look across, you'll see the empty frames. So this is floor 2, the Dutch room. This is the central palace. There's a fountain there. And again, it's meant to resemble a palace in Venice. Okay. So this is what you would see at night in the Gardner Museum. As you can see, it's dark. This is how it would have looked on the night of the robbery itself. So here is the Dutch room now, how it looks. So the initial photograph we looked at was the Sea of Galilee, Christ in the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so this is the Dutch room in 1926. You can see how similar they look. It's kind of astounding that these objects have stood in the same place for such a long time. And here you see the painting is no longer there, but its original place has been honored. Now, she carefully chose each piece for her collection, Isabella Gardner did, and she clearly deliberated on the placement of each work of art. Okay, and so she wanted to make a conversation between paintings in each of her rooms. So it was really like a private residence, as if you were walking through a private residence rather than a museum. And so each of the organizations, and you'll see there's no label dictating which painting is which, so you really needed to know a thing or two in order to enjoy the museum. Or you can learn to experience art without all of the information surrounding it. You could look at a painting and take it in without being bogged down by that extra information. So that meant that the robbers themselves would need to know as well what they were looking for. This is the Blue Room. This is where the Chez Tortoni by Monet was stolen. The Blue Room, in Isabella Gardner's imagination, was dedicated to her contemporaries, particularly Sargent, Dennis Miller Bunker, and many other painters painting at the time of her life. This includes the people in her social circle, and the paintings were chosen to resemble her life and the life of her friends. And so you'll see Venetian landscapes here, because Venice was her favorite city, but also the Chez Tortoni did stand here, and it's a wonder why they visited the Blue Room specifically for that one painting. It is confusing. Here is the Chez Tortoni. It's a very small painting. I'll show you where it was. Can we see it here? No, you can't see it in this picture. There's the Blue Room here. Okay. Well, this is where it originally was. As you can see, it's very, very small right below. This is another Monet, and probably the reason it wasn't stolen on that day is because she was actually taken away for cleaning. This is the portrait of his mother, a very stern portrait. And so this smaller work, see how small it is, put beneath, puts the two in an interesting conversation, right? A severe mother and a thoughtful, perhaps, son beneath her. Now, the thieves actually left the frame of this painting in the security director's office, so they managed to take it out of its frame and they left the frame behind. Okay, painted in 1875, so again, one of her contemporaries. The short gallery is one of the areas of confusion because this is where the Degas prints were, and where they did not take the Michelangelo drawing, which would have been worth far more. It's one of the smallest galleries, where books, textiles, and things are displayed. But there's a cabinet here, which would have held all of these small prints and drawings and watercolors. The smaller paintings by, for instance, Raphael, Whistler, Michelangelo, and of course the Degas. These are the Degas works that were stolen. This one is Leaving the Paddock. So you remember the belief that they were perhaps Irish thieves because they took the paintings that had horses in them, and that the horses were important to the Irish. So this is one of them. They were purchased in 1919, sorry. And the artist is best known for painting horse racing, music, and dance. Okay. They also stole this one, which is one of my favorite paintings. It's a procession on a road near Florence. Okay. It's not a painting, but rather pencil and sepia wash on paper. See here, you can see the ghostly figures of the procession here, and the kind of pastoral scene behind it. And then you have these, which are also stolen. The three-mounted jockey, Edward Degas, two works, Study for the Programme de la Soirée Artistique, and another here, so the music that was a popular theme for him. But this one really is my favorite of the ones that were stolen. This picture of the procession of all the stolen artwork, I think I'm most fond of this one. It's how magical it seems, how blurred. This is certainly the one that I admire the most. Now again, we have this odd choice here that was taken from the short gallery. It stood right behind those Degas prints. It's almost as if they were taking the prints and then noticed it, liked it, and wanted to take it on a whim. It would be an odd thing to come for. It's an eagle finial. So here, you can see it. They just kind of took it right off. It was an eagle finial insignia of the 1st Regiment of the Grenadiers of Foot of Napoleon's Imperial Guard. 1813 to 14. It was about 10 inches in height. Now this is the room that we saw from the palace gardens. This is the Dutch room, and the robbers knew that some of the most valuable paintings were here. She began, Isabella Gardner did, collecting art first from the Dutch, even though her true passion was Italian Renaissance art. So she filled this gallery with artwork from the Netherlands, Germany, England, all of this artwork from Northern Europe. And the Rembrandts were the most famous, of course, one of the most popular painters of all time he is. And so this was, they believe, that the central focus here. So they stole 3 Rembrandts. One that was very, very small, as you remember the portrait in the beginning. And this one here, so let's go look at them in a second. They also stole this Chinese Shang Dynasty beaker. This was the oldest work in the museum. The oldest, it's 12th century BCE. Bronze, 10 by 6 inches. So here it was, standing beneath the portrait, a doctor of law. You can see it very small right there. Okay, well, let's look at the Rembrandts. We'll turn back to the Flink, Govert Flink. I want to look at the Rembrandts first. Here we go. So this is the portrait of the artist of a young man, only about 1 inch by inch. So this is the actual size of the painting. It's very, very small, almost like a postcard. Not a postcard, like a little stamp, a large stamp. And this is where it was located in the gallery. You can see it right here on the side of this mantle. On the side of a cabinet, in the Dutch room. And this painting is the one that was spared. It's almost as if they forgot to take it. Okay, so this is a self-portrait of the artist as a young man at 23. They were the first 2 Rembrandts she ever bought. And this was kind of the catalyst to her decision that her private collection would become a public museum. And what I love about this museum is you do walk through and there are little masterpieces hidden. This little tiny etching is worth so much money, and it's just on the side of a cabinet there, just kind of hidden. I find that fascinating. Alright, let's move on now to the 3rd Rembrandt that they stole, or the would-be 4th. It's this one, Landscape with an Obelisk, painted in 1638. When Isabella Gardner bought this, she thought it was a Rembrandt, but in the 1980s, scholars realized that it was a Govert Flink, who was a follower of Rembrandt's, a student of Rembrandt's. So he painted in his style, but it was not Rembrandt himself. So she bought it as a Rembrandt, but when they stole it, it was a Govert Flink, and I wonder if they did not know that it was a Flink and not a Rembrandt, because again the paintings were not labeled, so they may have stolen it thinking that it was a Rembrandt. Now this one was placed, as you can see, by a window and a desk, and this was kind of to show people how important it was to sit before art and contemplate for a long, long time, and to come back to it over and over and over again, to see art as a kind of reflecting pool. So pass through the Rembrandts now. Okay. So here is a massive Rembrandt, very large, 51 inches by 42 inches. This was commissioned, so you can imagine this family here is quite wealthy. You have the wife sitting for the portrait, and the man looking as he just briskly walked in and has important business to tend to. This is called A Lady and Gentleman in Black, 1633. Okay. You can see that there's a map hanging behind him, which implies this kind of wealth, merchant wealth. And this is where it hung, right? You could see it from the palace windows, where it's now just a frame. Okay, let's turn now. And this is a very important Rembrandt because it is the only nautical scene that Rembrandt painted. He actually depicted himself as one of the people in the boat with Christ. So, this is Jesus' ability to calm a furious storm that rises and shakes the boat in the Sea of Galilee, 1633. Here. You can see Rembrandt's masterful use of light here on the waves and on the faces of the people. Okay. Now the only person who looks directly at the viewer and is wearing bright green is a portrait of Rembrandt himself. So if anyone knows who that is, I'm trying to determine who is looking directly at the boat or at the viewer. I can't see him. To say he's wearing green. I don't know who that person is. Is it there? Is that Rembrandt? He included himself, but I'm not sure which one he is. But this was painted when he was only 27. This is the Vermeer. This is the most probably expensive that was stolen, the $250 million Vermeer, due to the scarcity of Vermeer paintings. Again, only 36 or 35, I can't remember. So this is a real shame. The Concert, 1663 to 66, oil on canvas. This is a fascinating painting as well because it has two paintings behind, paintings within paintings. This one is a pastoral scene, and this is a kind of sensual painting that once hung in his mother's house. I can't remember the name of it, but I think I wrote it down. Let's see. The Procuress. Yes, The Procuress. That's what this painting is called, by Dirk van Baburen, which is an exuberant picture. It implies a kind of exuberance or lens, a collision or juxtaposition between the placidity of the people as they sing and play the piano with this man. And you have this kind of exuberant picture in the back. It's just a clashing of moods, I guess you could say. And then here you have a rug, a colourful rug, and it's not on the floor, you see, which is fast. Oh, we have a little fly. Did you hear him buzzing? So here we have a rug, colourful rug, but it's not on the floor. It would be considered too precious to be on the floor, which is kind of silly. So Gardner actually purchased this in 1892, and she bid out the Louvre and the National Gallery of London for this painting. So it really established her as a serious contender in the art collecting world and on the museum stage. This is just a scale diagram of sizes, so you can see how massive the Rembrandts were, which really goes to show how valuable they were. Looking at them now, the Rembrandt across from what was his name? Flink, I think. You can see how different they really are in style. And then this is a final stolen object list. But those are the paintings that are missing. I suppose it's good to familiarize yourself with them in case you ever happen to go to a friend's house and discover a Degas etching hanging on the wall. It could happen. So I hope you enjoyed this story, and about stolen art, that you learned a bit and that you're feeling sleepy. and have a wonderful night or day or whatever it is you're about to do. Thank you so much for joining me.